How about yourself?
I'm good. So, are you guys ready to start?
Yes. Yes, we are.
All right, so my first questions are for Granddad. I just kind of wanted to get your kind of like general background and yeah. The war started in 1954. Do you know how old you were?
Well, yeah, I was 11.
Okay,
Most people in 1954 had no idea that we were getting involved in Vietnam at all. I can tell you that.
right. Do you remember seeing anything on TV or any slogans or anything as a child?
Now, you probably will find it strange, but we didn't get our first two TV set till I was probably 11 or 12.
Oh, okay,
Um,
gotcha.
and you know, no, they're really honestly, I can tell you that probably 99% of the population never knew what was going on in 1954.
Sure. Um, So then I guess my biggest questions are about your life in college. What year did you begin at Villanova?
I graduated from Upper Merion in 1961,
Mm-hmm.
and I started Villanova that year. Um, and in all honesty, then I went for a year. My money ran out, and I had to work for 2 years before I could save enough to go back to Villanova. And I guess it was around when I went back to school in probably what 1963 or thereabouts.
Mm-hmm.
That pardon me.
Yeah. Sorry.
Probably in 63, 64 when I was back at school is when really the war started getting into people's consciousness, and the war, our involvement was much more active at that.
Mm-hmm. Did you have any like opinion about the war? Did you start taking a stance on it?
Um, at that time, no, not really. I was a kid. I was, in engineering school, and I was, I had to work when I wasn't studying or whatever. So, really, my only knowledge of the war was what I saw on the nightly news on TV,
Mm-hmm.
and that turned out to be, the news was very negative on the war.
Right.
All they would show on TV is, battle scenes of people, body bags and stuff like that. So I believe the press turned a lot of the public against the war. Starting somewhere in 63, 64, thereabouts.
Right. So do you did I guess the media's way of portraying the war, did that um kind of make it negative in your eyes specifically, or um, did you find any other opinions about it?
See, I was neutral on it. Um, maybe it's because I had so many uncles who served in World War II that I felt that if we're at war, um, we have to support our country and troops and so forth. So I had, I was sort of neutral on the whole thing in college.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, maybe a little bit low the whole situation.
Yeah. So did you do anything to prepare for the war? I guess I remember kind of speaking to you a couple months ago, and you said I.
Oh yeah, sure. Uh, okay, back then there was a military draft. Um, once you turned 18, you had to register um, with the draft board,
Right.
and if they needed people, they would just notify the draft board, which my draft board was in Norristown, Pennsylvania, which is the nearest city, and they would notify you that you got called up to serve. I mean, it was simple as that. However, I was in college, so we got a deferment. The people in college got a deferment as long as they kept their grades up and as long as they stayed in college. That's up until they graduated. So by the time I graduated, which was in 1967, the war was really in full force, and that's when all the anti-war people. I mean, it was really, really bad. And I just, I was more patriotic than that. And
Mm-hmm.
I figured that if I graduated and I got drafted, which is probably a sure thing, I wanted to make sure that I was in a branch of the service doing something that I wanted to do, which was fly for the Navy. So in my senior year, I went to signed up at school, and there was a Willow Grove Naval Air Station where I spent the weekend there doing all kind of physical, testing on me on my eyes and my physical state of health, as well as a lot of mental testing and visual testing and that sort of thing. Because I wanted to fly for the Navy.
Right.
And anyway, after that weekend, they notified me that I qualified for jet pilot, which out of 50 people or so,
Mm-hmm.
2 of us qualified for jet pilot. So I was pretty proud of that.
Yeah.
So I had that in my back, so that if I got drafted, I would sign up for the Navy and fly.
Right.
But to make a long story short, when I graduated, I joined General Electric, and I got assigned to work at a location, a factory that did military work. What we did is make the electric power plants for ships and submarines was the location I was working at.
Mm-hmm.
So that automatically gave me a military deferment because the government decided that they need engineers working in these places more than they needed me flying for the Navy.
Right.
So they gave me what's called an occupational deferment. So I never got drafted, and I never served. Now I sort of wish I did, but back then, knowing now what I know,
right,
that most of those Navy pilots were shot down and killed. So maybe it's best what happened. But in any event, that was what I was going to do.
Right.
I wasn't going to run to Canada like so many of the kids did to avoid the draft.
Mm-hmm.
Which I just thought that was just so immoral and so
right.
anti-government.
Yeah. Anti-America. Yeah. So do you feel like because of this war, America, like, overall kind of lost a sense of nationality?
I thought that war was the first war that I could ever think of just reading history. That was the first war that really divided the country. Before that, anytime there was a war, people were patriotic and they supported the government, they supported the soldiers, and it was, very, very good, very patriotic thing to do. This was the first war that really split America that way.
Right.
And I didn't like it. I just thought that's not for the good.
Mm-hmm.
And you see a lot of it today with the war the Middle East, Afghanistan, and Iran now.
Right.
There's people that just don't think we should be there, and maybe we should, maybe we shouldn't. But if
Mm-hmm.
the government decides we should be there, I think we should pull behind all the troops.
Right. So do you think how do you think, I guess, Lyndon Johnson did handling it? Do you remember him as president?
Oh yes, I do. I I I thought he was a very very shady character.
Right.
He and his administration. Well, let me put it this way. I think even though our first involvement was in the mid '50s or late '50s, that was more or less support of France because France they owned not owned but
Right. Yeah.
Vietnam was a French colony or protectorate or whatever territory or whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
And we in '54, and I think we were just supporting France and their efforts. But then France, backed out of the thing and left us there to fight. And the whole concept was to prevent the spread of communism in the world.
Right.
And that was a noble thought at the time. And that's really what we're doing there now. Lyndon Johnson, he lied to the American people in a couple of instances about our involvement and not being involved in Laos and so forth like that. And here,
Right.
we're bombing Laos and stuff like that. So there was a lot of things that he was not very honest to the American people about. And under his administration is when the war really ramped up. And
Right.
that's when we started spending, tons
Right.
of money and sending troops over.
Right. So
He ramped up.
do you think it was appropriate that he didn't run for his second term?
Well, yes. I think he backed out. Knowing Lyndon Johnson, he backed out because he thought he was going to lose, and he didn't want that disgrace. So that's to me that was the primary reason he backed out.
Yeah.
Because even at the Democrat convention for the nominating the president and so forth, there was riots and protests and whatever against the war. So he saw the handwriting on the wall.
Right. Right. Okay, so my next couple of questions are for Grandma, and then at the end I'll come back for a few overall questions for both of you. Is that okay?
It's okay. You can talk to us as long as you want off.
All right, thank you so much. All right, so Grandma, I'm going back to I guess society during the time. Did you know anything about the Vietnam War while you were still in Norway?
Not really.
Oh, okay.
I was young and really not that interested in politics at that time, and no, we did not hear much about it in Norway.
Okay, so you don't think that it swayed you at all to not come to America or come to America? Did that play any role really in your decision?
No, not at all.
Okay.
I am very grateful to Americans because if it hadn't been for America during the Second World War, Germans would have taken over Europe.
Right.
So I've always been very grateful to Americans for that.
Okay.
So that had nothing to do with it.
Good. Now, once you came over, did you learn about it at all then? Or did you know a little bit about it? Okay. So,
I learned about that. Yeah, because I lived in Boston and I attended classes at Harvard, and a lot of demonstrations against the war were going on at college campuses.
Right.
So time.
Do you remember any like specific things they would say about the war, or like any slogans they would say?
I just remember them chanting, "Get out of Vietnam." I don't remember any particular
Right.
slogans. I'm sure there were some, but I don't
Right.
remember.
So, I mean, but I guess that goes to show that there were student protests. Was that a pretty
Oh,
often occurrence?
yes.
And also, don't forget, this was the '60s were the age of the hippies.
Right.
You know,
Counterculture. Yeah.
kids just wanted, that's why counterculture, anti-government, anti-this. They didn't want to work. They didn't want to do anything
Right.
but just protest and smoke dope and sing and whatever they did. And I hated the whole hippie movement. And,
Yeah.
And what the difference, and when those soldiers would come home from Vietnam, they were not treated
Right.
nicely all the time.
So I'm guessing
Compared to today,
you didn't like that at all, you guys?
yeah, we didn't like that at all. We felt terrible when we saw things like that happening.
Yeah. Gotcha.
It was unlike today when soldiers come home, how we walk up and thank them for service. There was none of that going on. And when I worked for the school system in Massachusetts, when we lived there in the mid to late 70s, one of the kids that I worked with, her son, had been a helicopter pilot in Vietnam, and he was shot down in 1965. So she died, and she was then became a Gold Star mother, is what they called them. And
Right.
every time there was Memorial Day parade, she rode in the car, and
Yeah. So I guess as
and I guess the message there is that we live in a small town. Well, your mom marched in this parade.
right.
But in small towns, no matter what people felt about the war, they still respected the soldiers and the fact that her son was killed, and there was no protest, no whatever, over things like that.
Right. So even though the war did divide the country per se, you still felt that there was a great sense of nationalism, or at least in your small town.
Probably, especially more in small towns than
The big cities.
big cities, right?
Right.
I think that the Vietnam, as time went on, I think most people, especially the people, and I'll say this, the liberals who hated the war, protested it, and so forth, even they began to see the disservice they did to the military people coming back.
Yeah.
They've taken a 180, and like today, it's much different when the soldiers come back from the Middle East. They
Right.
do give them the due credit and respect. So, in a sense, the Vietnam War changed a lot of anti-war people in the sense that they may not like the war, but they have to respect the soldiers, and that didn't happen in Vietnam as it does today.
Right. Right. So I guess a big overarching question, do you believe that post-Vietnam America is a stronger nation as a result of the war, or no?
My opinion would be that there's still a very strong anti-war sentiment, but it's different than it was in Vietnam. Today, the anti-war sentiment is more of, why spend all that money over there? We should be spending that money here at home to help disadvantaged people, or people don't want to work or whatever. So it went from Vietnam, which is strictly, I would say, an anti-American imperialism type of approach, to today it's, we can't afford those wars approach. So it sort of shifted in dimensions, I guess.
Right.
You know what I mean there?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. All right. Yeah, that's really all the questions I had for you. Thank you so much for your time, both of you.
Okay, Austin, you have something about Kennedy on the.
Oh yeah, sure. Oh yeah. Do you guys remember where you were when you learned of President Kennedy's assassination?
Oh, yes. I was in high school in Norway, and the news came on that evening because, we're 6 hours ahead.
Right.
And we were shocked. The whole world was shocked. And I remember the next day in school, and this was decided before we found out about Kennedy, we had to write a report that next day about something that affected us greatly.
Right.
So I think 98% of the students wrote about Kennedy that day, but
Yeah.
so that's what I remember.
And for me, Austin, that was during that 2 years after my first year at Villanova when I had to work to save money to go back.
Mm-hmm.
I was at work, and someone came in and said that they just heard on the radio that Kennedy's been shot. And, we just all stood there in disbelief, really.
Right.
And that, this was over Thanksgiving, it happened, I guess, Wednesday before Thanksgiving. And since it was a holiday, we were home Thursday and Friday. And I remember watching live TV when the guy that shot Kennedy was being escorted from his prison. Lee Harvey Oswald was being escorted out of his prison cell when Ruby shot him. So I saw that live on TV.
Wow. Jeez.
Yeah.
Do you think that, like, because of his assassination, America kind of moved behind the next president in, like, support of whoever did this? Or, in support of whoever... against this, the assassination.
Well, the next president was Johnson, and he was not popular at all. And of course, he didn't run. He filled in Kennedy's term, and then he got elected for his own term.
Mm-hmm.
But he quit before his second term. Or quit before.
Right.
Before he got nominated for a second term. I don't think that Kennedy was shot, because of the Vietnam War or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe that.
Right.
And I think Johnson knew that he and Kennedy really were nothing alike. Even though he was his president, they still had very different views. So I think he knew he could not, live up to the Kennedy.
Right.
But,
so do you think if given the chance, if Kennedy was still able to remain president, that he would have done a better job handling the war?
I think in the sense that Kennedy, I think he would have trusted his advisors better. I think Johnson tried to run the war from the White House, and I just don't think that works.
Mm-hmm.
I would hope Kennedy would have done differently, although, Kennedy was involved in that failed Bay of Pigs invasion of Cuba.
Right.
And that, to me, if the truth were known, I would think that would have been more of a reason he got shot than the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
But the Cubans somehow arranged for the whole thing to happen, but we'll never know now.
Sure. All right. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much for your time. I got a lot of good information out of this, and it was actually really interesting.
Now, I'll tell you one more thing, and that's we chatted with the folks we're staying here with.
Sure.
and he was in the army, in the military. He's 5 years older than me, but
Yeah.
he said he was in the service in 1961 at Fort Riley in Kansas, and they had some strange orders. He said they had to get these boxes made of a certain dimension, certain size, and it was like thousands of these boxes, and they had to zip them somewhere. And then they also got orders to report to North Carolina, and they did all kind of maneuvers in the swamps and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And they kept asking themselves, what in the world are we training in the swamps for? And anyway, make a long story short, he said and nobody knew any of this stuff, why they're doing this stuff.
Yeah.
But the higher ups did. And he said the boxes got sent somewhere to California, and they got filled with all kind of
Russian?
war kind of stuff, tents and this and that and everything else, and they got all that stuff got shipped to Vietnam, and then
Yeah.
his service was up. He said a month or two after he left the service, after his time was up, all his comrades got shipped to Vietnam, and that's why they're doing training in the swamps. He never knew that.
Oh, wow. That's actually, geez. Was he like upset that he didn't get the chance to go over, or was he thankful he didn't?
Well, he was married at the time, and I think a child or two, so he was probably thankful.
Gotcha. Well, that's good then. But yeah, thank you for all of this.
You're welcome. If you have any other questions, call us back up.
Will do. All right.
Okay.
Love you.
It's good talking to you again, and I'd like to talk to you more often.
Okay,
Sure, I'll
good
definitely
luck.
call them.
Bye.
Love you
Take care.
too. Bye.
Bye-bye.